Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 6th episode, our target is the first season of the Disney Channel show, Gravity Falls. This video will cover the episodes in order, and I'll link them all at the end. If you prefer having the video cover the episodes in order from my least favorite to my most favorite, I'm going to quickly as possible make a comment with the timestamps for the episodes in the order of the ranking. So if you want it like that, there it is. And if you don't want spoilers for the ranking, avoid the comments. Gravity Falls is a great show, as I will discuss throughout the duration of this video, but I'd like to give a bit of information about my introduction to the show. When I first started watching Gravity Falls, the show had just finished for roughly a year by my calculations. I had never heard of the show until I learned to play the show's theme song on the violin, and my friend convinced me to watch the show. I watched along with my family, and we were instantly invested, watching episodes as often as we could, and rewatching episodes before continuing, in order to savor the yet unknown ones. The show is amazing in so many ways that it is impossible to summarize them all. The show has never stopped being rewatched by me and is still a constantly quoted show by my brothers and I. Needless to say, this show means a lot to me, and I'm very excited to rewatch it under a more critical eye and analyze what precisely it is that makes me love it so much, as well as attempt to give an accurate, to my opinion, ranking of the episodes, which was a more difficult task than I was expecting. The show was created by Alex Hirsch, based on his life with his twin sister Ariel and their summers, as well as their grandfather Stan. Many of the show's elements are taken from his personal life. Alex Hirsch graduated from the California Institute of the Arts and was hired to work on the Cartoon Network series The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, where he met the creator of Adventure Time, Petalyn Ward. Alex Hirsch later co-directed the Disney Channel show Fish Hooks. Shortly after that, he pitched his show to Disney with a pilot he made, and it was greenlit. The first season aired from June 15th, 2012 to August 2nd, 2013, running 20 episodes on Disney Channel. It got many fans and was picked up for a second season, which I will talk more about in that video. After its finale, the series has only gained more fans, sparking multiple books, and is often credited for the existence of so many things that people who worked on this later went to work on, including Disney shows Amphibia and The Owl House, and movies like The Mitchells vs. the Machines and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. This season features the voices of Jason Ritter, Christian Schau, Alex Hirsch, Linda Cardinelli, T.J. Miller, D. Bradley Baker, Carl Farulo, Nikki Yang, Thorop Van Orman, and Jackie Buscanario. This season features directors John Ayoshima, Joe Pitt, and Aaron Springer. It features writers Alex Hirsch, Mike Rianda, Ori Wallington, Zach Pays, Tim McKeon, Mitch Larson, David Slack, Tommy Leahard, Nancy Callahan, and Matt Chapman. The series follows twins Dipper and Mabel Pines as they are sent to their great-uncle Stan's cabin in the woods in a town called Gravity Falls for the summer. Each episode usually revolves around the trio hanging around the Mystery Shack, Stan's tourist attraction / home, or mysterious places around Gravity Falls. Important side characters include Seuss, the lovable handyman at the Mystery Shack, and Wendy, another employee at the Mystery Shack, who Dipper quickly gets a crush on. The series mainly focuses on the Pines twins solving the mysteries of the town, the big one being the mysterious author of the journal that Dipper found in the woods that details some of the unusual activities of the town before randomly seizing entries. Meanwhile, Stan has a secret of his own, being the mystery behind the vending machine in the lobby that we are slowly clued into. The series ran for 2 seasons, totaling 40 episodes, and today we will look at the first 20 that make up the first season. Let us not waste any more time and get to it, because this is going to take a lot longer than my typical episode. Season 1, Episode 1, Tourist Trapped. Tourist Trapped first aired on June 15th, 2012, and had 3.5 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and was written by Alex Hirsch. This episode does a great job at introducing how the show runs and is a great example on how to do a great pilot episode. With any given pilot episode, there is a little uneasiness to be expected, as the show hasn't quite found its footing yet. But this first episode does a great job in getting you immersed into the show and its characters, and has dialogue that feels like any other episode. The plot of this episode essentially boils down to Mabel finding a new boyfriend, Norman, who Dipper suspects is a zombie because of the journal he found in the woods that details the mysteries of Gravity Falls, with a mysterious author and an equally mysterious someone stalking the author. In the end, it turns out that Norman is actually a bunch of gnomes, and Dipper and Mabel defeat them. The episode ends with Stan gifting them each one item, Mabel choosing a grappling hook, and Dipper choosing the hat that he keeps for the rest of the series. This episode is simple but very fun and effective, and is never a drag to rewatch. Dipper's narration is a great way to ease audiences into the show, and I kind of feel like it would have worked for other episodes as well. Dipper and Mabel have a great sibling bond, as well as being a great representation of who their characters are in the rest of the series. Stan, Seuss, and Wendy are all rarely seen in this episode, but it makes sense to establish Dipper and Mabel first, so it's not really an issue. The gnomes being foreshadowed earlier in the episode as a joke is hilarious, and the final fight with them is a really fun sequence. And of course, the introduction of what would become the series-long mysteries, the author of the journal, and what's behind Stan's vending machine, is a great hook to keep coming back for more. 9 out of 10. Great beginning. Season 1, Episode 2, The Legend of the Gobblewonker. The Legend of the Gobblewonker first aired on June 29th, 2012, and had 3.14 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and was written by Alex Hirsch and Mike Rianda. This episode is a great follow-up to the first episode. It doubles up on the adventure aspect by having Dipper and Mabel actively searching for mysteries. This episode is funnier than the previous, has more character moments, a more engaging plot, and is a step up from the last episode in about every way. The plot of this episode follows Stan wanting to spend time with Dipper and Mabel by taking them fishing. When they get there, a reoccurring side character named Old Man McGucket makes his first appearance and warns everyone about about a lake monster named the Gobblewonker, but everyone writes him off as crazy. Dipper and Mabel, however, wanting to win a photo competition, ditch Stan and join Seuss to venture after the creature. After investigating, they get chased by the Gobblewonker, but manage to get it stuck in a cave. Upon approaching the creature, they find that it is a robot built by Old Man McGucket, who is trying to get his attention from his son. The B-plot follows Stan harassing other people at the lake, trying to find someone to hang out with. In the end, Dipper and Mabel join Stan after realizing that they should spend time with him. This episode is extremely fun, with some of the funniest moments in the show, such as the disposable camera gag. I enjoy the Scooby-Doo-like formula the episode follows, and how it has some character moments that were missing in the first episode. Dipper is a somewhat cowardly, yet simultaneously adventurous and overconfident kid, and Mabel is supportive, but also playfully taunts him. It's nice seeing a more caring side of Stan, and Seuss actually plays a role in this episode and is very funny. The introduction of Old Man McGucket is an important one, though I must admit that he isn't a perfect representation of who he is later in the series, as I don't believe the writers quite knew the mysteries surrounding him at this point, but it's close enough that it's not really an issue. 9 out of 10 episode. Season 1, Episode 3, Headhunters. Headhunters first aired the next day on June 30th, 2012, and had 2.17 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and written by Alex Hirsch and Ori Wallington. This episode I think is the weakest of the three so far, but with that being said, it is still a good episode. To be honest, ranking Gravity Falls episodes is very difficult because they're all very great. which is why I find it really fun to compare my thoughts with others, just to see what minor details create the differences in quality for people. This episode does a good job continuing the theme of solving mysteries by introducing a murder mystery in a very clever way. This episode follows Dipper, Mabel, Stan, and Seuss rediscovering an old exhibit of the Mystery Shack, a wax museum filled with wax figures of famous people. Mabel, feeling inspired, decides to make a wax figure of Stan, which sparks the grand reopening of the wax museum. However, the wax Stan is soon decapitated, leading to Dipper and Mabel seeking out the culprit by uncovering clues and interrogating various background characters. In the end, they find that the wax figures are secretly alive and killed Wax Stan, mistaking him for the real Stan, who they wanted revenge on for locking them away after they stopped making money. Dipper and Mabel defeat them and retrieve Wax Stan's head. This episode is a pretty average one with not a lot extra to say about it. I think the episode could have been better if there was a B plot, maybe about Stan and Seuss running the wax museum, but as it is still a good one. I think the investigation of the town folks is a fun and good way to introduce some of the recurring background characters. Mabel gets more of a chance to shine here compared to the last two episodes, especially in the beginning, by showing off her more creative side, which is nice. It also is another great representation of Dipper and Mabel's teamwork. The twist at the end with the wax figures is fun, and the final battle is also pretty good, especially with Dipper sword fighting Wax Sherlock's home on the roof, which is just peak absurdity. In the end, these are all minor complaints, and like I said, when the quality of a show is so consistent that you kind of have to look deeply into each one and find minor details that make you like or dislike an episode more or less than another. I think one of the things that holds this episode back is that there's a lot of just exploring the various side characters, which is fun but leaves a somewhat unremarkable impression, as the side characters' better moments are generally found in later episodes, where we already know who they are. 8 out of 10 episode. Weakest of the bunch so far, but far from bad. Season 1, Episode 4, The Hand That Rocks the Mabel. The Hand That Rocks the Mabel first aired on July 6, 2012, and had 2.95 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John A. Ushima and was written by Alex Hirsch and Zach Pays. This episode is probably the most unique episode so far, at least story-wise, as instead of the Pines twins solving a mystery, the episode is much more focused on building up the character of Gideon Gleeful, who is himself a rather mysterious character. The episode follows Dipper and Mabel exploring the rival of their uncle, a fellow tourist trapped owner, Gideon, who is famed for his sidekick abilities. This results in Mabel and Gideon becoming friends, though it becomes evident that Gideon wants to become more than friends. Mabel initially agrees to go on one date, though it quickly becomes another and another. Stan eventually gets wind of this and marches down to talk with Gideon's dad, Bud Gleeful, who is able to persuade Stan as he points out the lucrative opportunities. Meanwhile, Mabel continues to feel compelled to keep going out with Gideon, until eventually Dipper, being the good sibling he is, tells Mabel that he will tell Gideon how she really feels. Thinking that Dipper came between them, Gideon seeks vengeance on Dipper and reveals to him his magical amulet, which grants him his telepathic abilities. Mabel rushes to the rescue and tells Gideon what really happened, to no avail, but the twins are able to run him off. Bud breaks the deal with Stan, and the episode ends with Gideon swearing his revenge and revealing to the audience that he has a journal with a 2 on it, which is identical to Dipper's journal with a 3 on it. This episode is a really good one. Gideon is a great villain in this episode. I enjoy him both as Stan's rival and the twins' antagonist. Gideon's rising eeriness throughout the episode is great, as we slowly realize just how much influence he has over the town, and the lengths he is willing to go to get what he wants. Mabel really gets to take center stage here, as Dipper is really put in the back seat, which is a nice contrast to see. I think the balance between the two characters as a duo, but also as individuals, is a really good part of this show, and this episode is a great example of that. Dipper helping Mabel get out of her relationship with Gideon is really sweet, as well as him just being a listening ear for Mabel. And Mabel, in return, saving his life in the end is a nice way to show their friendship being a good thing for both of them. This episode really takes the necessary time to set up Gideon, and it really shows. The jokes in this episode are slightly less frequent, and the plot takes the spotlight here. I don't think I like this episode quite as much as the first two, as I'm more interested in the mystery-focused ones personally, but that is no criticism to this episode. 8 out of 10. Definitely ramps things up for the series by showing the viewers that this show might have more going on than originally thought. Season 1, Episode 5, The Inconveniencing. The Inconveniencing first aired on July 13th, 2012, and had 3.55 million US viewers. This episode was directed by Joe Pitt and Aaron Springer, and was written by Alex Hirsch and Mike Rionda. This episode is similar to the last one, as it more so serves the purpose of introducing a character, this time being one who's been neglected the spotlight so far, Wendy. Unfortunately, I don't think this episode is quite as good as the last. This episode follows Dipper and Mabel joining Wendy to hang out with her friends. Robbie, who is the typical sarcastic guitar-playing, troublemaking teenager. Tambry, a screen-addicted, indifferent-to-everything person. Lee and Nate, the rather thoughtlessly performing members of the group. And Thompson, a kind-hearted pushover who drives them around. The group breaks into a shut-down convenience store and have fun, while Dipper continues to get paranoid that something supernatural haunts the place, while also trying not to embarrass himself in front of Wendy, who he has a secret crush on, or her friends, who he wants to impress. And Mabel eats some nationally banned candy that makes her hallucinate, and putting her out of commission for the rest of the episode. Meanwhile, a small B-plot shows Stan unable to find the remote and being forced to watch an old black and white movie that he initially hates, but as we continue to go back to him, he starts getting more and more invested in. Eventually, the group summoned the two ghosts haunting the store, the Ma and Pa who owned the store back in the day, who were constantly harassed by teenagers in the day, and now loathe them. The ghosts strike their vengeance on the group until Dipper is able to ease them by admitting to the ghost, and Wendy, that he is only 12, not technically a teen, and embarrasses himself by performing a childish dance, which sends the ghost away. Wendy then covers for Dipper and doesn't tell the gang about the dancing, and the group go back home. This episode isn't really a particularly interesting episode in terms of story or plot. There isn't really a mystery or a cool supernatural element that, as I stated, I prefer in a Gravity Falls episode. Wendy is a character who is famous for not being a side character, but not really being a main character either. It's really up in the air whether or not she'll be at all relevant in an episode, and as far as Wendy episodes go, this isn't a standout one. It also has to introduce Wendy's friends, which does a good job of, but they aren't deep characters by any means, so it isn't really a difficult task. So I think it leads to some rather uninteresting shenanigans to fill up the runtime. That's another thing about this episode. Like episode 3, Headhunters, it lacks a B-plot, which I think could have served it well. Mabel's hallucinations lead to some funny moments, and so does Stan watching a movie he hates becomes emotionally invested in, which is a particular favorite of mine in the series, but it doesn't really substitute a B-plot. Dipper's crush on Wendy is handled well in this episode, with him pretending he's older than he is, and more mature, but ending on Dipper beginning his journey and coming to terms with the reality of his situation, that Wendy is simply too old for him. It isn't a bad episode, but it is by no means a spectacular one, and it is just missing that something that the previous ones had that makes it kind of average in the grand scheme of things. 7 out of 10. Weakest so far, but not without its merits. Season 1, Episode 6, Dipper vs. Manliness. Dipper vs. Manliness first aired on July 20th, 2012, and had 3.14 million US viewers. The episode was directed by Joe Pitt and Aaron Springer, and was written by Tim McKeon. I really like this episode. I think it's the first one so far that just focuses on being a really good time, with the characters we've gotten to know really well by this point. Plus, it has a nice message at the end, and some great jokes. The episode follows Dipper, Mabel, and Stan going out for breakfast, and Dipper embarrassing himself after failing a manliness tester and being mocked by Stan and Mabel at the idea of him being manly. Dipper runs off and finds a group of manitors, a mythical creature that are essentially just manly minotaurs. They teach Dipper to be manly by putting him through various tests and trials, ending it in them tasking him with killing the multi-bear. Dipper goes to kill him, but learns that, similar to Dipper, the multi-bear was taunted by the manitors for his unmanliness. Dipper decides to not kill him, and rejects the idea of manly that the manitors set. Meanwhile, the B-plot shows Stan liking the elderly waitress, who is a constant background character named Lazy Susan, and Mabel helps Stan work up the courage to talk to her. Dipper goes back to the breakfast diner to meet up with Mabel and Stan, who successfully talk to Lazy Susan, and Stan tells Dipper that he is manly for sticking up in what he believes in, even when everyone else disagreed. I think this episode is a great time all around. The comedy and story are really good, and the very concept of the manitors and the multi-bear I find hilarious. Dipper desperately wanting to become a man is some great foreshadowing for future episodes in which Dipper is eager to grow up, and Dipper realizing that the manitors may be strong and a certain definition of manly, but they lack any compassion, and him telling them off for it is really rewarding. Stan's talk with him at the end is great too. They don't have a heart-to-heart, as it would feel somewhat out of character for Stan at this point, but him casually telling Dipper that he was a man because he stood up for what he believed in even when no one else agreed is a great ending to this episode. The Mabel and Stan B-plot is enjoyable, and I think it helps progress the episode better. I feel crazy for how much I like this episode, because it seems like it's near the bottom of everyone else's ranking, and even series creator Alex Hirsch himself apparently considered this the worst episode of the show at one point. It's leading me to think that I'm the only fan of this episode. If anyone else is a fan of this episode, please let me know, because I feel like I'm insane for liking this episode as much as I do. 8 out of 10. Needless to say, but near the top of the list so far. Season 1, Episode 7, Double Dipper. Double Dipper first aired on August 10th, 2012, and had 4.18 million US viewers. It was directed by Aaron Springer and Joe Pitt. The story was by Mitch Larson and written by Michael Yanda, Tim McKeon, and Alex Hirsch. This episode definitely has a standout story in terms of Gravity Falls episodes so far. It has a good time with telling a clone story and relating it to Dipper's struggle, with the two things intertwining very nicely. Mabel also gets a good plotline introducing series-long characters, Candy, Grenda, and Pacifica. This episode features Stan running a party for the Mystery Shack to gain interest in the child demographic. Dipper sees an opportunity to hang out with Wendy and ask her to dance, and takes it. He overcomplicates it by making a complex list that Mabel points out is useless, and urges him to just talk to Wendy naturally. Dipper continues complicating his plans to the point where he clones himself using an old copier machine that Stan, in his words, fixed up, that has since gained the ability to clone people. Meanwhile, Mabel makes two friends at the party, Grenda and Candy, and also enters a dance competition against the mean popular girl, Pacifica Northwest. Mabel ultimately loses this competition, but to no distress, as the three friends stay after the party ends and have fun. Dipper, however, continues to get in his own way in a more literal sense now, and continues an overly complicated plan involving continuously making more and more clones. The planning comes to a crashing halt when Dipper runs into Wendy not on the dance floor and is forced into a natural conversation. It ends up going great though, as it becomes the best conversation Dipper has had with Wendy so far. When the clones discover this, they turn on Dipper for abandoning the plan, forcing Dipper to defeat them, but not before the party ends, and Dipper realizes that he needs to stop getting in his own way and just act as he normally would. This episode is a really good one. I think it's a much better Wendy episode than the Inconveniencing, because while Wendy isn't in it too much, Dipper's relationship with her is much better and more cleverly written. Dipper's inner dialogue with himself manifesting itself in the form of exact clones of him is not only a clever story, but also leads to a lot of fun interactions. We probably get the best B-plot so far, with Mabel in the introduction of returning characters Candy, Glinda, and Pacifica, who are all just as they are in later episodes. Sue says the DJ is great, and the clone of Dipper that got stuck in the printer is funny. But really, the best part of this episode is that central theme and the way the story tells it. It is a really great way of mixing mystery and Dipper's teaching moment. There's not really a lot more to say than that. It's great to see Mabel and Dipper both get a good episode despite them being in separate plots, and seeing Mabel support Dipper is nice. 9 out of 10. Great episode in just about every way. Top of the list so far. Season 1, Episode 8. Irrational Treasure. Irrational Treasure first aired on August 17th, 2012, and had 3.87 million US viewers. It was directed by John Ayushima. The story was by David Slack and was written by Tim McKeon and Alex Hirsch. This episode has a great mystery and story, as well as serving as another great episode for Mabel. This episode also has some of the best jokes in the series, and are so consistently placed throughout the episode. This episode follows Dipper, Mabel, and Stan getting wrapped up in the town's festival, celebrating the founding of the town, called Pioneer Day, in which everyone pretends like it's the 1800s. Stan desperately wants to leave, causing him to get thrown in a stockade, while Dipper and Mabel enjoy the festival. They meet up with Pacifica from the last episode, who it turns out is a relative of the founder of the town, Nathaniel Northwest. As such, she makes fun of Mabel's silliness, causing her to feel bad about herself. This sparks her in joining Dipper in his quest to uncover the truth about the founder of the town, brought about to him by the journal, to prove that she can be serious. They explore various clues throughout the town, each ending with Mabel's silliness somehow getting them to the next clue. Meanwhile, the two returning comedic police officers in the show, Blubbs and Derlin, attempt to stop them from uncovering the secret. Mabel and Dipper eventually find out the secret that a man named Quentin Tremblay became the eighth and a half president of the United States after winning the election due to all the other candidates getting killed in a landslide. He also founded Gravity Falls after falling into it on a horse, but due to his unseriousness, he was removed from office and the government covered up his existence. They also discover that Quentin Tremblay is still alive after he encased himself in peanut brittle, and together they manage to send the police away by ordering them to take a vacation. And the episode ends with Mabel realizing that her silliness is not something to be ashamed of, and Quentin Tremblay rides backwards on a horse away, never to be seen again. This episode is hilarious, and also a great representation of how creative and nonsensical this show can get with its mysteries, which is when the show is at its best, in my opinion. Quentin Tremblay is of course hilarious, not only in character, but just in the very nature of his existence. The townsfolk cosplaying people from the 1800s and making Stan go mad is a funny B-plot. Mabel and Pacifica's rivalry grows, with Mabel actually disliking her in this episode due to her more personal insults, and Mabel realizing that her silliness is who she is, and that it can come in handy is a nice conclusion, as well as her not needing to give Pacifica the evidence that her family didn't find the town, because Mabel doesn't need to prove anything to her. And Dipper immediately saying, "Well, I didn't learn anything," and then giving her the evidence anyways is a funny and satisfying conclusion. Definitely a standout episode that makes for a great rewatch. 9 out of 10, near the top of the list. Season 1, Episode 9, The Time Traveler's Pig. The Time Traveler's Pig first aired on August 24th, 2012, and had 4.14 million US viewers. It was directed by Joe Pitt and Aaron Springer, and was written by Alex Hirsch and Ori Wallington. The Time Traveler's Pig is a favorite for many, but personally I think it may be a tad overrated. It does introduce Waddles the Pig and Blendon the Time Traveler, which I think is why so many people hold it in such a high regard, including myself until I really started comparing the episodes with a more critical look. The episode follows Dipper and Mabel at Stan's mystery fair. Dipper spends the day with Wendy, while Mabel wins herself a pet pig that she names Waddles. Dipper accidentally hits Wendy with a baseball, trying to win her a stuffed animal, and before he gets ice to her, Robbie comes by with a snow cone and asks if she wants to go out with him, to which she agrees. Dipper, thinking he could have prevented Wendy and Robbie going out, had he not hit her with the baseball, spends the rest of the day sulking. That is until Dipper and Mabel meet a stressed-out time traveler named Blendon, who is searching for anomalies in the area. They distract him in order to steal his tape measure, time machine, and start the day over again. They keep having to start over as Dipper continues to try and solve how to avoid hitting Wendy in the eye with the baseball, while Mabel just has fun winning Waddles over and over again. Dipper finally gets it right, but at the cost of Pacifica winning Waddles before Mabel does, because apparently the two events cannot exist in the same timeline. Dipper and Mabel fight over the time machine, which results in them time traveling all over and creating anomalies. In the end, Dipper agrees to let Mabel win Waddles at the cost of Wendy and Robbie dating, and Blendon is arrested for the anomalies that Dipper and Mabel caused. Before I get into my problems with this episode, let me talk about what does work. Dipper sacrificing for Mabel is really nice and speaks true to his character. Waddles and Blendon are both fun characters, and the time traveling is uncomplicated and unique, which is nice to see. And of course, the references to the past episodes is really fun. However, I think that a lot of the episode is spent on Dipper trying to get Wendy to not date Robbie, which, unlike the episode Double Dipper, feels a lot more like Dipper actually having a chance than him desperately wanting to believe that he has a chance. The central conflict of Dipper getting it right with Wendy at the cost of Mabel losing Waddles is kind of forced, and feels like it could be easily fixed so that they can both get what they want. And finally, I'm conflicted about Blendon being arrested at the end of the episode for Dipper and Mabel's mistakes. Like, did he do anything wrong? Was he really all that antagonistic to Dipper and Mabel? I feel like he didn't do anything wrong and yet gets arrested, swearing revenge on Dipper and Mabel because they pretty much framed him. But this does get redeemed in a Season 2 episode, so I guess it's alright. Overall, I think the episode just doesn't have all too many interesting things going on that make me want to continue going back to it. 8 out of 10. Still a fun episode, but I find it to be more flawed than other people do. Season 1, Episode 10, Fight Fighters. Fight Fighters first aired on September 14th, 2012, and had 2.94 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John A. Yushima and was written by Alex Hirsch and Zach Pace. Fight Fighters is an extremely fun episode that features great jokes and a great new character. The main plot, while not the greatest we've seen so far, is a fine one, with the story really being the driving force here. Robbie also really steps up in his character as the antagonist. The episode follows Dipper caught in a fight with Robbie over Wendy. Dipper, trying to avoid the fight, hides in a local arcade and accidentally summons one of the characters from the Street Fighters-like game called Fight Fighters, named Rumble McSkirmish. Rumble is pixelated and acts like a video game character, and agrees to fight Robbie for Dipper. The B plot features Mabel trying to get Stan over his fear of heights. While that happens, Dipper runs from the superpowered Rumble, who wants to beat up Robbie more than Dipper wanted, and Dipper is able to get Rumble to stop after telling him that he lied to him about Robbie killing his father. Rumble, betrayed, is convinced that Dipper is the final boss and starts fighting him instead. Dipper loses, but Rumble vanishes because he finished the game. Dipper apologizes to Robbie, who is going to beat him up, but decides not to after Dipper doesn't run from him and instead accepts his fate. Robbie and Dipper then truce with each other to not fight around Wendy, as it would result in neither of them being with her. This episode is a ton of fun. Rumble is an extremely funny character who pretty much carries the episode, and every single line of his is hilarious. It is another Dipper trying to be with Wendy episode, but the Rumble and Robbie fight overshadows that to the point where it hasn't become overused yet. The Stan and Mabel subplot is also a ton of fun, if not just a lesser subplot than the episode Dipper vs. Manliness. But in the end, any Mabel and Stan subplot is bound to be fun. Also, Stan saying that he owns 10 guns is my personal pick for the most surprising thing Gravity Falls was able to sneak past Disney, of which there are fortunately many. Seuss also has some great character moments. Overall, this episode is a ton of fun, with not a whole lot to say about it, just a really good time, which leads to a really good episode. 8 out of 10. Season 1, Episode 11, Little Dipper. Little Dipper first aired on September 28, 2012, and had 2.6 million US viewers. The episode was directed by Joe Pitt and Aaron Springer, and was written by Alex Hirsch, Tim McKeon, and Zach Pays. Little Dipper is a fun episode with a neat concept that intertwines with the conflict between Dipper and Mabel well. It also sees the return of Gideon, who is better in this episode than he is in his first episode, in my opinion. The episode opens with Dipper and Mabel playing chess, with Dipper winning and adding another tally to his wins, which Mabel doesn't have any of. Mabel and Dipper then find out that she is a millimeter taller than him, to which she and Stan make fun of him for being short. This leads Dipper to consult the journal, which tells him about crystals that can grow and shrink things, and he uses them to create a flashlight with these abilities. The episode also features a side plot where Gideon attempts to steal the Mystery Shack for yet unknown reasons. The two plots combined when Dipper and Mabel fight over the flashlight, only for it to end in Gideon's hands. He uses it to shrink Dipper and Mabel, to use it as leverage against Stan to get the Mystery Shack from him. Gideon then realizes that he can just shrink Stan and take the shack by force, but Dipper and Mabel are able to stop him after apologizing to each other. Mabel confesses that she always feels lesser than Dipper because he always wins the games they play, and so being taller made her feel like she had won something, and so Dipper lets her stay taller than him when he regains the flashlight. This episode is a very fun one, and is identical to an episode like Double Dipper, in which the cruel mystery intertwines nicely with the theme. Stan and Gideon's interactions are hilarious, and Dipper and Mabel bickering and ultimate resolution is really nice. With the exception of the time traveler's pig, we've really only seen Dipper and Mabel on the same side, so having them be at odds is a nice switch up, and their resolution is very sweet and realistic. Both sides admitting they messed up, apologizing, and then the bickering instantly becomes a joke for them. Gideon serves as a really great antagonist once again, and it's nice to see him again since he wasn't a major character in an episode since episode 4. The concept is neat, if perhaps a little underutilized, but ties into the main plot well. 9 out of 10, another home run for Gravity Falls, and a nice setup for the secret reason why Gideon wants the Mystery Shack. Also, Seuss is cool. Season 1, Episode 12, Summerween. Summerween first aired on October 5th, 2012, and had 3.48 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and was written by Alex Hirsch, Zach Pays, and Mike Leonda. Summerween is a fan favorite for many, with its unique concept and great villain. And, well, let's just say that if you didn't like my take on the time traveler's pig, you most certainly won't like my take on this episode. This episode follows the Pines family and Seuss celebrating Summerween, the show's workaround to the fact that it's supposed to take place in summer, with the explanation being that the people in Gravity Falls love Halloween so much that they celebrate it twice a year. Dipper and Mabel, being the self-proclaimed kings of Halloween, are excited to trick-or-treat, at least until Dipper gets an invite from Wendy to go to a Halloween party. Dipper fakes an illness to avoid going with Mabel, Candy, and Glenda, but ends up angering the Summerween trickster with his lack of Summerween spirit. He demands that they gather 500 pieces of candy or else he will eat them, so Dipper joins them and Seuss drives them around neighborhoods. When they get all but one piece, Dipper is left in charge of the candy, but when he sees Robbie and Wendy approaching, he quickly hides the candy in costume. When Mabel and her friends return, they discover that Dipper accidentally dumped the candy down a river, and that he wasn't really sick and just wanted to spend time with Wendy. With time up, the Summerween trickster chases after them, only for Seuss to run him over with his truck. The trickster regenerates, however, revealing that he is made from the Summerween candy that no one eats, and he eats Seuss. However, Seuss then eats him from the inside out, and the day is saved. Mabel confesses to Dipper that she wasn't just mad at him for abandoning her, but also because she is afraid of growing up. Dipper apologizes and the two make up. Also a subplot where Stan attempts to scare these two kids who seem impossible to scare, and eventually he succeeds, results in Stan giving their abandoned candy bags to Dipper and Mabel. So, why don't I care for this episode as much as others do? Well, I think that Dipper is just really unlikable in this episode. He abandons Mabel on their favorite holiday, just so that he can spend time with Wendy at a party, where A, Robbie will also be, and B, presumably all of Wendy's friends, so it's not like he's even going to have her alone. On top of that, I think there are a few cliche or underwhelming elements, such as Dipper faking an illness, or that the bush that Dipper shoves the candy into just so happens to have a river behind it, that it just seems a bit too coincidental. Those are all my grievances, really. I think the episode is still a good one. The jokes are still funny, and of course the concept is insanely creative, in a way that only Gravity Falls could pull off. The Summerween trickster is a great one-off villain, who serves as both a threatening presence and leads to some funny moments. Stan's subplot is funny enough, though not a standout in the world of Gravity Falls subplots. Also, the ending with everyone sitting around the TV enjoying each other's company is a really nice ending. I can't say I get why so many people love this episode so much. I think it's because of Mabel being afraid of the future and Dipper being ready to grow up, and that becomes very important later. But I think the later episode Carpet Diem is a much better representation of that. 8 out of 10 episode. Not without its highs, but I think it may be a tad overrated, at least for me. I really like how everyone's favorite episodes seem so different from each other. Very little consistency between people's rankings. Now that is a sign of a good TV show. Season 1, Episode 13, Boss Mabel. Boss Mabel first aired on February 15th, 2013, and had 3.45 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima, the story was by Tommy Learhard, and was written by Tim McKeon and Alex Hirsch. Boss Mabel is a fairly standard episode of the show for me, with some standout funny moments. There are unfortunately a couple things holding this one back for me. The episode follows Stan being harsh to his employees, Dipper, Mabel, Wendy, and Seuss, and Mabel making a deal with him for her to run the Mystery Shack for 3 days while Stan goes on vacation. Whoever gets the most money gets to run the shack for the rest of the summer. Mabel tries to prove that being nice to people will end in better results than being mean to people, while Stan goes on his favorite game show, Cash Wheel, a parody of Wheel of Fortune. Mabel becomes overly nice to everyone, giving Wendy the rest of the day off, letting Seuss live out his dreams as the mascot named Questiony the Question Mark, which he quickly becomes embarrassed by, and letting Dipper capture a real paranormal beast, the Gremlin. Meanwhile, Stan wins thousands of dollars by cheating the whole time. Mabel becomes stressed out by the chaos her niceness has caused and has to start barking orders at everyone in order to fix things after the Gremlin breaks free and destroys the shack. After the expenses of repairing the shack, Stan returns, revealing that he lost all of his cash in the bonus round, where he couldn't remember the word please. Mabel and Stan come to an agreement, realizing that both sides had a point, and Stan resumes his position and makes more of an effort to be nice to his employees. This episode definitely peaks with Stan's hijinks on Cash Wheel, with him shouting, "I'm giving none of this to charity," being a favorite of mine. Mabel's plot isn't bad either, with the Gremlin being a good enough antagonist, and with a funny defeat, and Seuss as Questiony the Question Mark leads to a lot of funny moments. Although I can't help but think that this is a really good example of Wendy's bad characterization. I've neglected to mention any examples of Wendy's bad characterization so far because it didn't seem important enough to bother mentioning. But in this episode, Wendy stepping all over Mabel because she's the boss and is being kind feels really out of character for what we've seen of her so far. Otherwise, this is still a pretty fun episode. Mabel gets some really funny lines, and Stan's punishment in the form of the Stan Wrong song is really funny. 8 out of 10. Near the bottom so far, but not without its merits. Season 1, Episode 14, Bottomless Pit. Bottomless Pit first aired on March 1st, 2013, and had 3.1 million US viewers. The episode was directed by Joe Pitt and Aaron Springer, and was written by Alex Hirsch and Mike Leonda. Bottomless Pit is a trilogy of stories told by Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss, and partially Stan, after they fall into a bottomless pit. As such, the episode is a bit difficult to summarize the quality of, so let's get straight into the synopsis of the episode. The episode follows the four falling into a bottomless pit, leaving them with nothing better to do than tell stories. Dipper tells a story about him being embarrassed by his squeaky voice, which leads to him to consult McGucket about a potion that will change his voice. He drinks the potion but sounds like a guy on a commercial, and is subject to ridicule because of it. He goes back to McGucket, who says that he gave him the wrong potion and offers him a new one. Dipper rejects, instead opting to go back to his old voice, realizing that his voice is unique. Seuss tells a story about cheating in a pinball game with Dipper and Mabel before being zapped into the machine. The trio must then defeat the skeleton cowboy inside by having Seuss press the reset button. Stan tells a 30-second story about him winning the football bowl, to which everyone boos. Finally, Mabel tells a story about her not liking Stan's lying habits, so she consults Dipper's journal, which tells her about a pair of teeth, which makes the wearer unable to lie. She gives them to Stan, who then torments Dipper and Mabel with his excessive honesty. The story ends with Mabel having to lie to the police officers after Stan confesses his crimes to them, and she concludes that sometimes lying is for the greater good. Mabel puts the teeth in a box, which it is then revealed is the same box that Mabel threw into the bottomless pit in the beginning of the episode. From there, the episode returns to the plot, and the four are sent right out the top with no time having passed, and conclude the pit to be a wormhole. This episode, being made up of a trilogy of stories, is kind of difficult to talk about as if it were one episode, so I'll do my best. With all the stories being shortened, there isn't a whole lot of notable plot developments or character moments to discuss. Rather, they are much more focused on comedy. Good comedy, granted, but still only comedy. The first story, Voiceover, is funny enough. Dipper's new voice leads to some funny moments, and the reintroduction of Old Man McGucket is nice. The second episode, Seuss's really great pinball story, is the best of the three in my opinion. The pinball game setting is fun. The skeleton cowboy is a funny villain, and Seuss is always a win. Stan's short story, Grunkle Stan Wins the Football Bowl, is hilarious and perfectly suits Stan. And finally, Mabel's story is funny, with Stan teaching a bear to drive and being overly honest when he gets the truth teeth. The way the story loops back to the Bottomless Pit plot is fun, and honestly, the Bottomless Pit is just a really great concept for telling a trilogy of stories. Hard to rank this one for the reasons I've already stated, but 8 out of 10. Probably near the bottom as the rest of the episodes tell one coherent story. Season 1, Episode 15, The Deep End. The Deep End first aired on March 15th, 2013, and had 4.5 million US viewers. The episode was directed by Joe Pitt and Aaron Springer, and was written by Nancy Cohen. The Deep End is one of the funniest episodes of the entire show, with many people claiming it to be the absolute funniest episode, which I'm personally a bigger fan of the comedy Irrational Treasure, but it is up there for some of the most consistently funny jokes. The episode follows Dipper, Mabel, Stan, and Seuss on the hottest day of the summer, going to the public pool. There, Dipper becomes an assistant lifeguard with Wendy and breaks rules with her, trying not to get caught by who I can only assume is the main lifeguard, Mr. Poolcheck. Meanwhile, Mabel spends time with her new crush, a kid who always stays in the pool, named Mermando, who tells Mabel that he is secretly a merman who, through unfortunate circumstances, ended up separated from his family and stuck in the public pool. A third plot also ensues, with Stan trying to steal the perfect lawn chair from Gideon, while also avoiding being thrown in pool jail. Mabel comes up with a plan to break Mermando out, much to the dismay of Dipper, who is placed on night guard duty after his job is put at risk. Stan also snuck in that night to steal the chair, only to discover that Gideon had put glue on the chair, and Stan becomes stuck. Mabel uses the pool supplies to free Mermando, causing Dipper to pursue her, ending with them at the beach, and Mabel explaining the situation. Dipper decides to selflessly give Mermando the pool supplies so that he can find his family, and Dipper loses his job, only to find out that Wendy was also fired for stealing snacks. Mabel, sad at Mermando being gone, sulks at the pool, only to find that Mermando has sent her messages in a bottle, detailing his return to his family. This episode, as I have stated, is extremely funny. Mr. Poolcheck, the lifeguard who takes his job ultra seriously, has some incredible comedic scenes. Mermando is also a fun character, and a nice contrast to the usual Mabel crush, who typically turns out to be evil. His backstory and failed escape attempts are hilarious too. Dipper trying to spend time with Wendy while also avoiding confrontation with the anxiety driving Mr. Poolcheck is a fun plot to watch unfold. Same with Stan and Gideon's competition over the chair, which is a fun contrast to the usually more threatening plots Gideon has, but also having the exact same energy in their usual arguments. Mabel trying to rescue Mermando is a nice plot for her, and the way it interacts with Dipper's plot is nicely done. Dipper sacrificing his job for Mabel in Mermando is a nice character moment for him, after seeing that he is in a similar situation with Wendy as Mabel is to Mermando, both wanting to be with someone they know deep down they can never be with. Also, I feel like a broken record at this point, but Seuss is fantastic as always. 9 out of 10 episode. Definitely a standout one that has gained much appreciation over time, and for good reason, for sure near the top of the list. Season 1, Episode 16, Carpet Diem. Carpet Diem first aired on April 5th, 2013, and had 3.36 million US viewers. The episode was directed by Joe Pitt and was written by Alex Hirsch, Tim McKeon, and Zach Pays. I find that this episode is a better version of Summerween in a lot of ways, or at least in the terms of the message that it's trying to get across. The episode features Dipper and Mabel becoming annoyed with each other after going through a recent series of grievances with each other, leading Dipper to suggest that they should have different rooms. Luckily, Seuss just so happens to find a secret room in the Mystery Shack that leads Stan to hold a competition between Dipper and Mabel to see who can have the room. In the middle of the competition, Dipper and Mabel both visit the new room and rub their feet on the mysterious carpet labeled Experiment 78 that causes them to swap bodies. This leads to Dipper and Mabel ceasing to increase their scores and instead trying to sabotage the others. Seuss also swaps bodies with Waddles the pig, which results in a B-plot where Seuss wanders around town as a pig, and Waddles wanders around the shack as Seuss. Seuss has to run away from Old Man McGucket, who wants to eat him, and Waddles manages to get Seuss a girlfriend and a raise, despite his inability to speak. Though Seuss does get broken up with by the end of the episode. However, Dipper and Mabel continue to sabotage each other. Dipper ends up having to spend the day with Grenda and Candy, and Mabel ends up having to talk with Stan, ending in Stan giving the room to Dipper. Dipper and Mabel swap back, and Dipper enjoys his new room. However, the two quickly realize that they miss each other's company, even if they get on each other's nerves at times. And so Dipper moves back into the room in the attic with Mabel. This episode is a fun one. It has some good jokes, and the conflict between Dipper and Mabel complements the carpet's mystery well. It's nice to see a bit more of Candy, Grenda, and especially Waddles. Seuss shares a nice bit of wisdom at one point when he suggests that Dipper and Mabel should appreciate what they have and not fight over a new room. Seuss and Waddles' subplot is also a ton of fun. Dipper wanting some independence and Mabel not wanting things to change is a nice bit of foreshadowing into some of the conflicts in the second season. Stan and Dipper also have some nice moments that I don't think enough people talk about, and also is nice foreshadowing for the episode Dreamscaperers, which we'll be covering before too much longer. This episode is a pretty fun one. Not a favorite, but not bad. 8 out of 10. Season 1, Episode 17, Boyz Crazy. Boyz Crazy first aired on April 19th, 2013, and had 3.16 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and written by Matt Chapman and Alex Hirsch. This episode is alright. It peaks in the comedy, but otherwise can be an unmemorable episode, which is extremely rare for Gravity Falls. This episode features Mabel, Candy, and Grenda going to a boy band concert called Several Times, who they then go backstage to meet, only to find out that they are clones made to form a successful boy band. Several Times are being held hostage by their producer, and so the girls break them out and keep them in Mabel's room. This leads to Mabel not wanting to let them free, which makes her become similar to their producer, and she learns that she has to let them go. The B-plot contains Wendy wanting to break up with Robbie, but falling for him again after he plays a strange music disc. Dipper, with the help of Stan, investigate, only to find that when the song is played backwards, it contains a secret message about mind control. They show Wendy and Robbie, and Wendy dumps him and becomes angry with Dipper when he immediately after asks her out. Rewatching this episode made me realize that it has very mediocre moments. The whole plot with Several Times is weird, and not the usual Gravity Falls weird, but rather in a way where it's more so weird and less so enjoyable. The whole concept of them being grown up in a lab is where the weirdness officially reaches my personal limit. The members of the boy band are funny though, so that's nice. Mabel is pretty selfish here for not allowing the clones to go outside, which is very odd for her character. Dipper is also pretty selfish for not caring about Wendy's feelings and thoughtlessly ending her relationship with Robbie, and kind of backtracks the ending of the episode Fight Fighters. The producer, Mr. Bratzman, is a really unmemorable antagonist, which is another rarity for Gravity Falls. Stan and Dipper do get some nice moments together though, which is a duo that we don't often get to see solo, so that's definitely an upside. But the song on the disc that Robbie plays feels like a really incomplete plotline to me. Where did he get it? Where did he find it? And Why does it have mind control abilities? Overall, it's just a really odd episode that sticks out in an unfortunate and rare bad way. 7 out of 10. Bottom of the list so far, but not without the occasional funny moment. Season 1, Episode 18, Land Before Swine. Land Before Swine first aired on June 28, 2013, and had 3.5 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and written by Alex Hirsch and Tim McKeon. Land Before Swine has a lot of negatives with it, primarily in the character writing department. However, the cool concept and, as always, funny jokes somewhat save it from being last place. The episode follows Waddles being stolen by a pterodactyl after Stan puts him outside, despite Mabel specifically asking him not to. However, Stan lies and says that he did what he could to save Waddles, and so Dipper, Mabel, Stan, and Seuss go after the pterodactyl. They come across Old Man Magake, who joins them on their quest, and they discover that there are many dinosaurs buried under Gravity Falls, being kept alive because they've been encased in sap. The team quickly comes to turmoil when Mabel discovers that Stan let Waddles outside, and Dipper gets fed up with Seuss messing things up. However, the group comes across the pterodactyl and Waddles, which leads to the final battle, where Stan ends up saving Waddles for real this time, and Dipper trusts Seuss' plan to escape the dinosaur. Stan and Mabel and Dipper and Seuss make up, and the episode ends. This episode is really dragged down for me because of its character moments. Stan and Mabel's conflict feels forced and rather overdramatic at times. Stan lying to Mabel and then very shortly after accidentally letting the truth out is poor timing and leads to an unfun conflict. Seuss and Dipper's argument is also very forced. Seuss's clumsiness is amplified in this episode, so that his actions actually hinder the progression of the plot, and Dipper is extremely impatient, which causes their argument to feel even more forced and dragged out from reality. It's always a bummer to me when a show amplifies a character's negative quality in order to force a plot where another character gets mad at them for it. On the bright side, though, this episode still has some great jokes, and of course, dinosaurs, which are impossible to make not cool. Although I do wish we got to see more than just the pterodactyl. Speaking of which, this episode is single-handedly responsible for me mispronouncing the word pterodactyl, because Seuss says it wrong the whole episode. That doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the episode. It's just something funny I wanted to point out, because pterodactyl just feels like the right way to pronounce it now. Also, this episode has arguably the stupidest joke in the whole series, when Stan mistakes Waddles' name for Woggles after being included in a conversation when the group, including himself, says the name Waddles about 1,000,000 times. Though this is actually a compliment, because even though it's the stupidest joke, it still makes me laugh, even if perhaps a bit ironically. Also, Old Man Magake having to eat his way out of a dinosaur is hilarious. Same with Stan punching a dinosaur in the face, both in his made-up story and in reality. 8 out of 10, near the bottom of the list so far, but it's got its moments, even if some are more ironical enjoyment. Season 1, Episode 19, Dreamscaperers. Dreamscaperers first aired on July 12, 2013, and had 2.7 million viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and Joe Pitt, and was written by Matt Chapman, Tim McKeon, and Alex Hirsch. This is the turning point for many viewers. Whereas before, the show's continuity generally consisted of a line of dialogue or two, the show from this point onwards really ramps up the overall story, and introduces Gravity Falls' strangest and most threatening villain, Bill Cipher. The episode follows Gideon trying to once again steal the Mystery Shack for unknown reasons, this time by breaking in and stealing the deed to the shack, hidden in a safe. He fails after realizing he doesn't know the code, and is chased away by Stan. Because the code only exists in Stan's mind, Gideon accesses journal number 2, and summons a demon named Bill Cipher, a floating triangle with a top hat, bow tie, one eye, and a hunger for chaos. Gideon makes a deal with him to steal the code from Stan's mind, who Bill seems to have history with, and in return, Gideon will help him with something. Seuss and Mabel overhear this and tell Dipper, who consults journal number 3 and learns that they can also enter Stan's mind and find/destroy the code before Bill gets it. Once in Stan's mind, they meet Bill and the race is on to find the memory first. Dipper explores through Stan's memories of him, however, and discovers a memory where Stan tells Seuss that he thinks Dipper is a loser. The gang eventually find the memory, but it turns out that Bill had disguised himself as Seuss, which he reveals after the real Seuss comes back. Dipper doesn't help after hearing Stan's memory, but Mabel and Seuss are able to steal the memory back and throw it into the Bottomless Pit in another memory of Stan's. This angers Bill, though, because of his broken deal, who begins fighting them. Dipper attempts to leave Stan's mind, but finds the memory of Stan calling him a loser again. But he hears the whole thing this time, where Stan is actually talking about himself and how everyone thought that way about him, and that he, similarly to Dipper with Stan, thought that his dad hated him because he always made him do difficult things. But it turns out that he really just wanted to toughen him up so that the world punched him, he would fight back. And now Stan wants to do the same for Dipper. With that knowledge, Dipper aids in the fight against Bill and tells everyone that they can imagine whatever they want in the mind and it'll come true. They use this until Bill has had enough and he abandons his quest to defeat them, leaving with an ominous warning about the things they know changing. This episode ends with the day seeming saved, but Gideon having broken in while they were all in Stan's mind and has stolen the deed to the shack. This episode is a great one. The introduction to Bill Cipher, the setting being in Stan's mind, Gideon's plan, and of course that ending. The ending with Gideon taking the shack after what seems like a happy ending, and the final shot of the creek and a slow, sadder version of a theme song playing. I will never forget how my brothers and I watched the episode right before school, and then had to leave right after the episode was over. And the entire school day I had to try and work without knowing what happens next. I love that feeling when a TV show ends on a cliffhanger that's been so well set up that it seems impossible to do anything but watch the next episode immediately. Anyhow, the rest of the episode is great too. Bill, while probably in his weakest writing-wise, is still a fun and threatening presence. The two characters from Mabel's TV show that get brought to life thanks to Bill in Stan's mind are funny, temporary additions to the cast. Seuss and Mabel get some solo moments, which is a duo we don't often see, which is a shame, honestly, because their silly personalities bounce off of each other really well. The continuity being expanded upon through Stan's memories is also great, as well as the battle against Bill in the end. The one unfortunate thing about this episode is when Dipper doesn't hear all of what Stan says, and results in the confusion, and is rather lazily written. But other than that one drawback, this is an otherwise phenomenal episode that does so much. Bill is now out there somewhere. Gideon takes the shack. We get a great Dipper and Stan episode. All the pieces are in place for the season finale. 9 out of 10. Top of the list. Now on to the finale. Season 1, Episode 20. Gideon Rises. Gideon Rises first aired nearly a month later on August 2nd, 2013. And I thought I had to wait a long time to see how it finished. And it had 3.18 million US viewers. The episode was directed by John Ayushima and Joe Pitt and was written by Matt Chapman, Alex Hirsch, and Mike Rianda. What a season finale. It has everything one could want. Stakes, funny jokes, good character moments, satisfying conclusions, callbacks, and intrigue for what the next season has to offer, and even more. The episode follows right after the first one leaves off, with the Pines family living with Seuss and his grandma, desperately trying to find a way back to the shack. And Stan is out of a job, and they are running out of money. After trying to convince the town of Gideon's evil doings and failing to do so due to his popularity, Stan decides that he can't defeat Gideon and buys bus tickets for Dipper and Mabel to go back home to California. Realizing it's up to them, Dipper and Mabel take matters into their own hands and request help from the gnomes from the first episode. Meanwhile, Gideon reveals the reason why he wanted the shack. He read in journal number 2 that the other journal was around the area, referring to the one that Dipper got. When Dipper and Mabel attack Gideon, he defeats the gnomes using a whistle and steals journal number 3 from Dipper and realizes that there were 3 of them and not 2. Dipper then gives up, thinking that he only won every battle against Gideon because of the journal. And so Dipper and Mabel get on the bus to go back home, but then get attacked by Gideon and his giant Gideon bot after he suspects Dipper holds journal number 1. Once he realizes that Dipper doesn't have it, he kidnaps Mabel to make his queen once he finds the other journal. Dipper, however, is able to jump off a cliff and into the robot's glass eye, busting through and tackling Gideon inside, ending in all 3 of them falling off the bridge. However, Mabel is able to save Dipper and herself using the grappling hook from episode 1, and the entire town gathers around Gideon's broken robot that caused a massive explosion when it hit the ground. Gideon then convinces the town that it was the twins' fault, at least until Stan shows up, having found out Gideon's secret that he spies on the citizens of Gravity Falls, and reveals him as a fraud to the town, getting him arrested and thrown in prison. The 3 return to the Mystery Shack, and Susan and Wendy help restore it. The ending shows Stan revealing that he has journal number 1, and he is now has all 3 journals, and is building a portal of some kind underneath the Mystery Shack, accessed behind the vending machine. This episode is phenomenal. Gideon serves as a great threat, now taking ownership of the Mystery Shack and his search for the journals being revealed. His plans for the Mystery Shack and turning it into Gideon Land, which I'm pretty sure is a parody of Disneyland. The callbacks to previous episodes is amazing, such as the gnomes or McGucket building Gideon's robot, like he built the Gobblewonker, and especially Mabel's grappling hook, and that finally gets put to use. There are so many good scenes too, like Stan's phone call to Dipper and Mabel's parents, lying to them about their desperate situation, and his eventual acceptance that the twins will have to go back home, and everyone sadly saying goodbye to them as they leave on the bus. The desperation in this episode sets the tone for it exponentially, and somehow the jokes in this episode are still somehow so consistent, such as the introduction of Seuss's grandma. And the final battle against Gideon on the bridge is maybe my favorite sequence in all of Season 1. It is so good. Dipper defeating Gideon and Mabel. Dipper defeating Gideon and Mabel saving their lives as they all fall off the bridge is spectacular. Stan finally revealing Gideon for the fraud he is in front of the whole town is another great moment and very satisfying to finally see Gideon get taken down. Also, that final scene of Stan having all 3 journals is a great intrigue for what Season 2 has to offer, but that, unfortunately, will have to wait for another time. 10 out of 10 episode. Now, here's a ranking of the episodes from worst to best, which I will expand upon when reviewing Season 2. Number 20, Episode 17, Boyz Crazy. Number 19, Episode 5, The Inconveniencing. Number 18, Episode 18, Land Before Swine. Number 17, Episode 3, Headhunters. Number 16, Episode 4, The Hand That Rocks the Mabel. Number 15, Episode 14, Bottomless Pit. Number 14, Episode 12, Summerween. Number 13, Episode 13, Boss Mabel. Number 12, Episode 9, The Time Traveler's Pig. Number 11, Episode 16, Carpet Diem. Number 10, Episode 6, Dipper vs. Manliness. Number 9, Episode 10, Fight Fighters. Number 8, Episode 1, Tourist Trapped. Number 7, Episode 15, The Deep End. Number 6, Episode 2, The Legend of the Gobblewonker. Number 5, Episode 11, Little Dipper. Number 4, Episode 8, Irrational Treasure. Number 3, Episode 7, Double Dipper. Number 2, Episode 19, Dreamscaperers. And finally, Number 1, Episode 20, Gideon Rises. Overall, Season 1 was great. Adding up all the scores ends with about an 8.5 out of 10. Such a good time through and through. It has occurred to me that Season 2 probably contains the better episodes of the series, but that is no criticism to this series. Ton of fun moments and equally great stories and plots with great characters. A couple more things about the ranking before we wrap up. 1, the ranking is subject to change. When I was working on this episode, my list was changing constantly. Right now I'm pretty satisfied with where it's at right now, but I could change my mind when I cover Season 2. So any changes there are just an updated opinion, not a mistake. 2. When I cover Season 2, I will be adding the episodes to this ranking, giving my ranking of the complete series. My Season 2 review I am anxiously working hard to release as soon as possible, but understand that it may take some time. In the meantime, I will release weekly episodes on movies, as always. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to share any opinions you had on the show. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.